I always thought 50 would feel different. They say it's the golden birthday, the age where you've lived enough to know better, but still have enough time to enjoy the fruits of your wisdom. I thought it would be laughter, music, family, champagne glasses clinking. And in a way, it was. My friends gathered, the candles glowed, the room was filled with people cheering my name. I looked around that night and thought, this is it. This is the life I built, the love I invested in, the joy I deserve. Gabriel walked in late, but I didn't mind. He was always late to things, always the man who wanted an entrance. He smiled that smile I used to fall for, carrying a plain white envelope in his hand. At first, I thought it was a card, maybe a letter, maybe something sentimental to mark the milestone of my 50th. My heart softened as he leaned in, kissed my cheek, and pressed it into my hand, and then he whispered, "Read it later." But later couldn't wait. I slid my finger under the flap, smiling like a girl opening a love letter. My eyes ran across the first line, and I felt my stomach drop. Petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce, on my 50th birthday, surrounded by my friends, my family, my children. I sat there holding the death certificate of my marriage, wrapped up in a cheap white envelope. The music kept playing, people kept laughing, but my world tilted sideways. My vision blurred, the words swam on the page, and I looked up at him. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look sad. He just looked finished. I excused myself quietly, smiling so no one would follow, and locked myself in the bathroom. The envelope shook in my hand. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like a woman celebrating life. It looked like someone who'd just been robbed of it. 50 years old, and my husband of 25 had chosen this moment, my moment, to tell me I wasn't his anymore. The questions clawed at me. Was it another woman? Was it the years of silence between us, the way we drifted further apart in the same house? Was it me? Did I become too much or not enough? Why here? Why tonight? Why like this? I thought about all the sacrifices I made, the nights I stayed up with sick children while he worked late, the dreams I folded away neatly because his career came first, birthdays I celebrated quietly so we could save for vacations that never came, the countless little ways I made myself smaller, quieter, easier, so that our marriage could last. And in the end, none of it mattered. He handed me divorce papers like a birthday gift. When I walked back out, the candles on my cake were already lit, 50 tiny flames dancing in the dark, waiting for me to make a wish. And as everyone sang, I stood there, holding back tears, thinking, what do you wish for when your whole life just went up in smoke? I blew out the candles, and the room erupted with cheers, but inside, I was crumbling. He clapped, he smiled, like he hadn't just ripped the ground out from under me. And I realized then, this wasn't about kindness or respect. This was about control, about him choosing the stage, the timing, the humiliation. He wanted to break me publicly, even if nobody else knew what was in that envelope. When the night ended and the guests drifted home, I sat alone in my kitchen with the papers spread out on the table. Every paragraph was a knife. Every signature line felt like a coffin lid closing. 25 years, reduced to legal jargon. Irreconcilable differences. That's what the paper said. As if all the love, the history, the laughter, the children, the fights, the makeups could be summed up in 2 cold words. I cried until my throat was raw, and then I stopped because something inside me shifted. I thought, if this is how my story changes, then maybe it's not an ending. Maybe it's a beginning. I'm 50 years old and I still have life in me. I still have joy, and maybe I can still have love. But not like this. Never like this. So I folded those papers, put them back in the envelope, and I promised myself if he thought this was the night he broke me, he was wrong. This would be the night I began again. I didn't sleep the night after my party. I watched the shadows move across the ceiling like slow waves, counting the tiny sounds a quiet house makes when everyone else is dreaming. At 4:11 a.m., I made coffee I didn't want and sat at the kitchen table with that envelope like it might bite. I kept thinking, If I stare hard enough, the words will rearrange themselves into something softer. They never did. When the sun finally came up, everything changed color, but nothing felt new. I heard his keys in the door a little after 7. He'd left right after the guests claimed he needed to give me space, which was just his way of avoiding consequences. He walked in like a man coming home from work, like nothing had happened, set his phone down, and asked if I wanted eggs. The audacity floated through the room like cologne. I said, "Why my birthday?" He didn't answer at first, just stood with his back to me, hands braced on the counter like he was holding up the house. I asked again, and this time his shoulders tipped forward a little, a small collapse barely there. He said, "Because you'd be surrounded by people who love you." I laughed, a dry sound I didn't recognize. "So you served me pain with protection?" He turned around and looked me full in the face, "So I wouldn't back out again." Again. That word was a trap door. He told me he'd been thinking about this for a year, that he'd tried to bring it up, but we were busy, the kids needed things, the timing was never right. He said I deserved a celebration either way. I thought, what kind of man burns down a house, then compliments the architecture? I asked the question that had been buzzing behind my eyes since I opened the envelope. Is there someone else? He didn't rush to deny it. He set the kettle on the stove, turned the flame on too high, and finally said, "There isn't someone else in the way you mean." It's funny how people think they can tuck truth inside grammar. I let the silence do the work. He filled it. I never stopped checking out. I just kept going further away. And then, because I'm the kind of woman who keeps receipts, I started listing the distances. The year he slept in the guest room because of his back but never came back. The way he took up running and ran past dinner every night. The way he started saying my office like it was a country with a border. The apology flowers with the same 3 lilies like they came from a subscription service for guilt. He didn't argue. He just nodded like a man in a courtroom, accepting a sentence he'd already served. When our son, Jamal, FaceTimed that afternoon to ask how the party went, I stepped into the pantry so he wouldn't hear the tremble in my voice. I told him it was lovely because parts of it had been. I didn't tell him yet. I wanted to hold his childhood for one more day. When our daughter, Layla, sent a photo of the cake crumbs and wrote, "50 looks good on you, Mom," I sat on the floor and cried until the tile pressed shapes into my skin. 50 looks good on me. Maybe it still did. But what looked good didn't feel good. By evening, the house smelled like the roasted chicken he made when he wanted to smooth a thing over. I didn't touch it. I said, "We're going to tell the kids together and you're going to answer the questions you're trying to hand me." He agreed too quickly, like a man reading from instructions. I told him to sleep at his brother's place. He moved slow, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of frames, as if saying goodbye to his own history. On his way out, he turned like he remembered something important and said, "You'll be okay." I looked at the envelope on the table, the one he'd folded like origami, and thought, eventually, but not tonight. The next morning, I woke up with my mother's voice in my head. Stand up straight. Drink water. Don't let trouble steal your posture. I showered, brushed my hair, put on lipstick, then sat on the edge of the bed and let the air dry my face because tears do what they want. I made a list on a yellow pad. Call attorney, make copies, therapy, groceries, walk. It felt ridiculous that groceries and grief could share a page, but that's how life is. Big things sliding in next to the small ones, all of them clamoring to be done. We told the children that evening on a group video call. Jamal stared at us like his screen froze. Layla chewed the inside of her cheek, the way she did at 9 when she lied about brushing her teeth. I said, "We love you both. This is about the marriage, not the family." It's a sentence I learned from other mothers, a sentence that's true and also feels like trying to hold the ocean back with hands. Jamal asked if it was his father's fault. Gabriel said, "It's my decision." And I watched our son rearrange his face into adulthood. Layla asked if holidays would be weird. I said yes, but we'd be together anyway, and sometimes together is what you make it. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet and let the new shape of our lives thud into place. I thought of the first apartment we had, how we slept on a mattress on the floor for a month and ate noodles by the window because the table was still on layaway. We were broke and happy and certain we were rich where it mattered. I remembered him carrying me over a threshold because a movie told us it was romantic, bumping my head on the door frame and laughing until I cried. There were good years. People forget that when they make villains and martyrs out of ordinary humans. There were good years that don't vanish just because they ended. I started therapy the week after. The office smelled like new books and eucalyptus, and the chair was the kind that holds you without swallowing you. The therapist, Gloria, wore her hair in a coil crown and listened with her whole face. She didn't say, "You'll be okay." She said, "You've been living with goodbye in the room for a long time." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her about the vacations, the graduations, the Sundays with jazz and pancakes. But even in the sweetness, there had been a chair left open. She was right. Goodbye had been renting a room in our house for years. Gloria asked me to make 2 lists, one called What I Lost, the other called What I Get to Keep. On the first, I wrote certainty, the way he reached for my hand in the middle of the night, the jokes that were ours alone, the plans that marked the calendar like stars. On the second, I wrote my laughter, my friends, the admiration of my children, my mother's hands, my own name. I wrote my body, which had carried babies and burdens and holidays and never failed to show up. I wrote my mornings, which were mine again. I stopped wearing my rings. I didn't hide my bare finger. I didn't announce it either. The first time I walked into the grocery store without them, the cashier, a girl with a nose ring and a kind smile, said, "You look really pretty today." I almost told her. Instead, I bought oranges and a plant I didn't know how to care for. I put the plant on the windowsill and told it I would learn its language. My friends showed up like a brigade. Tasha cleaned my junk drawer while telling me divorce stories she'd heard from cousins and coworkers. She made me laugh at misery until it blinked. Michelle took me to a matinee and let me fall asleep on her shoulder in the dark. Andrea drove me to the copy shop and stood between me and the heaviness of legalese, translating anger into action. They brought food I couldn't eat and sat with me while it cooled on plates. I learned that company feeds you in ways a fork cannot. One night, 3 weeks in, Marcus called to ask if I wanted to try counseling. The irony made the air thin. He said he'd been thinking that maybe he rushed, that maybe he panicked at 50 the way some men do at 30. I said, "You didn't panic, you planned." He didn't argue. He said he missed the way the house sounded in the morning. I said the house still sounded like coffee and radio and the soft tick of the thermostat. He said he missed me. I told him I missed a version of us that didn't exist anymore. He was quiet. I almost softened. Almost. But then the memory of his envelope at my party rose like a wall. I said, "We can be kind, we can be gentle, but we cannot go backward." He exhaled a long, old breath. "I know," he said. "I just had to ask. The papers move through their stages like a season you didn't vote for. There are so many signatures in a divorce, so many places to write your name until it blurs. Consent to this, acknowledgement of that, division of things you forgot you owned."